In this video, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and what I'm going to do, maybe it's easiest to show, what I want to do in the end is for us to have an application named a timer, and what you can do is say, I want to run a timer for 20 minutes, and then down here, after you hit enter, it'll show a countdown of the number of minutes that have run, and then 20 lines later, it will play the sound file that you want it to play. So you type in timer 20, that's what it'll do. And you can also type an optional parameter over here known as the gain. And you'll see what that is as we get into the code. But by default, our code is going to have a gain of minus 30. And this number, you'll see it used later, has to do with the volume at which you want to play this at. I don't remember why the gain is a negative number, or can be a negative number, but maybe we can look that up later. But anyway, the default is minus 30. So typically, if you want a timer to run 20 minutes, you'll do that. And as I mentioned, after you hit enter, you'll see 1 minute has passed, 19 to go, 2 minutes has passed, 18 to go, something like that. We'll have some output here, 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 here. And then when it gets to the end, it'll play a sound file. So that's the code that we're going to write over here. So let me backtrack over there. And then the next thing I want to say is that what I'm going to do, you can see I have the usual blueprint set up over here with a for expression, and then I have the run value over here, which starts with the blueprint and then handles both the failure and the success cases over here. So one thing I showed in a previous video was how to read command line arguments. So what I'm going to do this time is just say that what we're going to do is we're going to read those command line arguments in this line that I have right there. Then we're going to have one or more lines here to process those command line arguments. And the reason I say that is that there are several things that can be wrong with that. If the user just types in timer, what I want to do is show a usage statement. If they type in timer 20, that's fine. If they type in timer foo, that needs to be an error. If they type in timer 20 and then a gain of 0, that's also fine. And then arguably we could keep handling more parameters over here and say, well, I don't know what you're doing over there, so that's wrong too. But I don't know if I'll get into all that. But what I do want to do is handle this case of the usage statement, this case, which is correct, this case, which is correct, and then other cases like this one, which is not correct, or this one, which is not correct. So hopefully we'll handle all those by the time we're done. And that's what I mean by this part where we have to process the command line arguments. And then once we do all that and we come down here, then finally what we'll do is play that sound file. And this is kind of a crazy little application because if you're just writing it for yourself, it'd be real simple to just play the sound file. But what I want to do is create a little application that we can distribute to others and have the usage statement and everything like that. So the first thing I want to do is come over here and handle this case where they just type in timer and then hit enter. So what I want to do here is we're going to verify, what we call it, verify a minimum of one command line argument. And then what I'll do is pass in args right there. So from this part right here, you can tell that this is going to be a function. So I want to create a function with this name, and I'm going to pass this one parameter into that. So we can come back up here and say, now I'm going to create a function, and we'll call it that. And the parameter it's getting is the command line arguments. And I showed in the previous video that this is a chunk of string by default. And then what I want to do is handle this situation. And it's important, again, to know that there's going to be multiple things that we need to handle right here, those multiple situations that I showed you. So what I want to do here, I'm just going to do a basic check right here and just say, well, if args.size is greater than equal to 1, that's good enough for right now. So we'll just say then ZIO.succeed. And we don't have to have a success parameter, so I can just use this unit type right here. And that's because what I want to do is if this succeeds right here, then I just want to go down to the next line here. And if that one succeeds, I'll go to the next one and so on until we finally play the sound file. So this value here doesn't matter, and that's why I have that underscore right here, because I don't care about the value that comes out of this function. What I do care about is the else situation. So the else situation is going to be the ZIO.fail. And what I want to do here is I want to handle, so again, as we're processing these command line arguments in these lines right here, different things can go wrong. And what I want to do is make those failures. So I'm going to do ZIO.fail, and I'll show you what I want to do is I want to call this one no command line args. Okay, so that's going to be one type of failure. So that will fail in this line right here. And again, we have ZIO.fail, so it's going to come flying out of that for expression. And then it's going to end up as a failure over here. So that's going to be the first case. So you can see this note I have that there can be several different types of failure. So this one is going to be the first type of failure. And then we're going to want to handle that over here. So I didn't get any command line arguments, so I'm going to do something over here. So let me finish this up here, and then we'll come down to that. So what this is right here, because we're going to have multiple different types of failure that we're going to handle in a match expression here, what I want to do is create an enumeration to handle these different failure types. And we could call that, how about failure reason? That's a decent name. And we could say, well, the first case we have right here is there are no command line arguments. So again, there's going to be another one over here and another one over here as we go along. But right now we just have this one right there. And because that is going to be an enumeration, I'm going to need to import those. So we could say I want to import failure reason dot star right there. So now I believe this function is correct, and the way I'm using that here seems to be correct. So now I have no command line arguments. So when I get no command line arguments, like I mentioned, what I want to do is print a usage statement over here. So that will be a print line, and then we'll have a usage message that we're going to create. So that's what we need right there. And I can create that anywhere. I can create it up here or inside the object. So we could say val usage message. And I don't want you to have to watch me type, so I'm going to copy this and paste it in. Be back in just a moment. All right, so that will look like that a little bit. So that's our usage message right there. And now if I get rid of that, I may need another case over here. So let's just do that, get that out of the way. And just say print line and something else happened. And then we can do Scala CLI. What did I call this? I called it ZIO timer. And let's make sure that works there. So we do get that usage statement right there. And what does it say? I need to update to 2.18. So we have that right there. And let's try to run that again. So again, this is running this. I'm not just compiling this code, but I'm actually trying to run it. And that should also be a dependency now. They changed that in a recent version of Scala CLI. So now that's using a dep. And that case is unreachable. So actually, I was better off leaving that off. How about that? So it is smart enough. We'll come back to that in just a second. So a cool thing about the compiler that is not very obvious right at the moment is if I add this in, you'll see what I'm thinking about. So again, we have those types R, E, and A, and we're going to fill those in. So when we look at the code right here, that doesn't have any requirements for an environment. So we could say it takes any environment. And then this was what I wanted to note, was that in the error case, what's coming out of here is this no command line args, which is actually a failure reason, as you see up there. So I put failure reason here, and then if this code succeeds, as you see right here, it'll just return a unit. So that's what we have over here. So what I was thinking about was this is a failure reason coming out of this function right here. So if this fails right here, there's a failure reason coming out, and then that's what we're going to be working with over here is a failure reason. So then the compiler is smart enough to say, hey, Al, there's only one failure reason right now. So you don't need this other case statement that I had in there. Like that. That case statement is not needed because the Scala compiler is smart enough to look at the code here and say that's the only possible failure reason right now. So the next thing I want to do here is process the minutes to wait. So that's going to be that first command line parameter over here, like 10 or 20 or something like that. So we want to focus on processing that number right now. So I'm going to say minutes to wait, and then we'll have a function, and we'll call it get minutes to wait. And what we can do is get that out of the args parameter like that. So let me align things here real quick. I like my arrows aligned. So now we want to create this function right here that's going to process the arguments and see if we could do that. So we come in here and say get minutes to wait. We know that's going to be a function again because it's taking a argument in here, and that args again is a chunk of string. And what are we going to do here? So we're going to try to process the minutes to wait. And a thing we should do is test that other case too. I think we could do both at the same time. So if somebody types in foo, that should be an error. And if they type in 10, that should be good. And we're not going to worry about anything else over here. We're just going to look at that first parameter right there. So actually, let me leave that like that. That's what we're working on. And I can actually handle this, again, with ZIO.attempt. So again, we're going to attempt to get the first parameter out of the args. And we should have at least one parameter, so that part, in theory, should be safe. Because if it's not one parameter, that code should fail right there. So we should at least have one parameter. And then the tricky part here is we want to convert it to an int. So again, what could happen in this case, that's going to be successful. In that case, that's going to fail. And in this case, that's going to fail. So that's what's happening here. That's why I'm using attempt, because that can fail. And what I want to do now is kind of control that failure a little bit more. So I could say, or else fail with my own custom reason. So instead of just having I want to have my own custom failure reason. So again, these are failure reasons. And I'm going to call this an invalid int for the minutes. So you could call it minutes parameter or anything else you want. But I'm just going to say minutes right there like that. So now I have a second failure reason. And that means I'm going to need to update this code down here. But before I do that, I want to put the function signature on this guy right here. So again, we're going to create the ZIO of R, E, and A. When we look at this code, we don't have any requirements, so you can put any right there. Again, we're going to have a failure reason come out of here. And then the success type here is going to be an int, because if this works, we're going to get an int out of that code right there. So that should be minutes to wait, and we have that right there. That looks good. And now I could say case, and what did I just call it? Invalid int for minutes. And again here, we can have a print line statement. And I hesitated earlier when I was writing this line here. You can say that this maybe should be print line error, and this one is definitely print line error. I kind of hesitate on the usage part as far as whether that's an error or not. I suppose it is, so we'll call that one an error. And we could have this as a message up here, and I think I'll probably do that just to keep all my messages in one place. So I'll say invalid int for the minutes parameter, and that's going to be that message right there. So now we can come up here and do that. So we say val that, and now we just need a little message to tell them that things like foo are not correct. So I could say how about invalid int for the minutes parameter, actually. All right, and let me save that and see if I've done anything wrong. I think I've done everything so far. So let's go back to Scala CLI and try to run that. So here I have no command line arguments, so I should get that usage statement. And then here the way you do that with Scala CLI is anytime you have command line arguments, you have to use that dash syntax like that. So here I'll say 10 minutes, please. And we don't get any error. And all that means is that we didn't get an error here. So in theory, we're still going through this for expression. So that's good. We just came out of ZIO.succeed right here. So let me say this should be a failure. And indeed, there we go. Invalid int for the minutes parameter. And then hopefully we get that same thing right here. Invalid int for minutes parameter. Excellent.